Hello and welcome to a new episode of Klartext Triathlon. Today with Ironman 70.3 world champion Rico Bogen. And today's podcast is something very special. It's not only coming out in the original German version, but also in an English version that has been translated using AI. And I'm really excited to see how it will be received by the Germans and international listeners. And now it's off to the commercials. Today's episode is once again brought to you by the OMNi-BiOTiC Graz Triathlon 2024. After the OMNi-BiOTiC Apfelland Triathlon has become a permanent fixture on the race calendar in recent years, there is now a second major triathlon event from OMNi-BiOTiC on August 25th, 2024, namely the OMNi-BiOTiC Graz Triathlon. What can you expect? A 1.9-kilometer swim downstream in the River Mur, then a 90-kilometer completely closed bike course through the vineyards of the region, and rounded off by a 3-lap half marathon through the city center of Graz. You will also have the opportunity to get very close to the pros, some of whom will once again be at the start, and of course a fascinating after-race party awaits you. In order to be perfectly prepared for this competition, Klartext Triathlon is offering you a discount code together with OMNi-BiOTiC. Klartext 20. It can also be found in the show notes to secure you a 20% discount on OMNiPower products, for example Carbotonic, which is really extremely well tolerated. And with that in mind, I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. End of advertising. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Klartext Triathlon, today with our world champion Rico Bogen. Nice to have you here, Rico.
Yes, hi Alex, I'm happy to be here.
Yes, you've really gone from zero to hero this year with your victory at the Ironman 70.3 World Championship in Lahti. And that has also paid off in that respect. You were voted Newcomer of the Year at the Sailfish Night of the Year last week, and you also came second in the Triathlete of the Year competition. Congratulations again.
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to have done quite well there. That is also the reflection that you were well received by the fans. I would also like to thank everyone that they voted so diligently for me, and I'm happy about every single vote. And yes, then to come second behind Jan Frodeno, second place for Triathlete of the Year, is also a great honor. I wouldn't have thought it is possible to beat him, and then to let him finish the last year in style. He is also a well-deserved winner.
Definitely. Of course, it's also a tribute to his life's work, but I'm relatively sure that if it hadn't been the year that Jan Frodeno retired, you would most likely have been Triathlete of the Year. But I think you can also live very well with second place. What do these two awards mean to you?
Yes, a lot, because it's a fan vote. And that's why this is now not necessarily a performance that I just had to call up on the day, I'd say. Sure, the performance has reflected the whole year, but it's more about how you were received by people, whether they thought it was shit, how I did it, whether they didn't appreciate it, and so on. That's why it's a bit like that. How it was received and what they give back, and that's why I think this award is really cool.
I can totally understand that, and I think it's 100% deserved. And I still remember your race in Lahti, how you took your heart in your hands and then passed Mathis Margerier and Fred Funk relatively early on in the race and then saved the whole thing at the finish. And I just found it so fascinating. I think you had just under 3,000 followers at the start of the race, and the next day you had about 11,000. And that was just an incredibly beautiful story that I think only sport could have written.
Yes, it was a really, really cool and beautiful day that I think nobody would have expected beforehand, not even me with the win. And yes, I wouldn't have thought beforehand that there would be so much feedback and that the followers would increase so much. In Kraichgau, where I had already won, somehow I gained 1,000 followers. But the World Championship is yet another more attention, and then to have so many at once were added all at once was really cool, and the cell phone was no longer silent.
I can imagine that. And was this victory in Lahti a surprise for you, or did you know in advance that something could really happen?
Yes, winning was a bit of a surprise. I had actually imagined top 5 as a dream goal, and I knew that I was in good shape. I had done another altitude training camp, which went very well, but it was also my first time at an altitude training camp, so there was a bit of risk involved. So, of course, you don't really know whether it will have the desired effect or whether you'll be far too tired and won't be able to do anything that day. That sometimes happens. Yes, everything went so perfectly together, and actually the whole race, I was where I wanted to be the whole time and had, let's say, everything under control, just as I had planned. That's why everything was very, very perfect, and it wasn't quite expected to come out on top.
Yes, that's true. And I think you did really, really well. Of course, you weren't really aware of the hype surrounding you. How did you deal with the hype that was created around you? Were you a bit overwhelmed at times?
Yes, the first 2 weeks in particular were very busy with media. I then tried to answer all the questions on Instagram, or at least read them briefly and give them a thumbs up, which took a long time. I don't know if I'll always be able to do that in the future. But yes, I actually want to try to keep it up to some extent. But yes, everything after that was a bit more focused on the media. Fortunately, we had already agreed with the coach beforehand that I would take it a bit easier afterwards because it's the highlight of the season, and then have a bit of a break, training break, or only train when I feel like it. That's why I was able to say I'd do more media for a week and cut back a bit on training. That's why it wasn't too much now. So it wasn't like I said, oh shit, I actually have to go out and train, but I actually want to be on my cell phone, or there's actually something else to do here. That's why it coordinated quite well. It then became a bit more strenuous, where I then prepared again for Challenge Pegera and for Boko, and then got back into training more. And then there were still the sponsor meetings and a few podcasts or a magazine. Then there was 1 or 2 weeks where I thought it would also be nice if it could ease off a bit at some point, and then you could just train.
Yes, at some point you want normality again, especially if you didn't know it like that from your previous life, which I assume is the case now. And that does an incredible amount to you. And you don't just experience it in triathlon, but also in other sports when you become world champion. It's also a burden to a certain extent because you have to deal with a lot more media, sponsors, etc. And it's not uncommon to see that the following year isn't that easy either. And I think it will also be a big challenge for you next year to confirm this performance from Lahti. But of course, you now also have a higher pressure of expectation from outside that top performances are somehow expected from Rico Bogen.
Yes, that's probably the case. In any case, everyone knows me now, and I can no longer go by as the underdog, so to speak. And now there will be even more of these magazines before the race, or an interview beforehand, or at the press conference. But yes, it's actually part of the life as an athlete, as a professional athlete. That's why I think I can handle it quite well, and I don't put myself under too much pressure. That's actually the most important thing, that you don't say to yourself, yes, I have to win every race now, because that's just the wrong kind of pressure. Exactly. I don't think anyone should expect me to win every race. Therefore, triathlon is just, or there is just too much competition in triathlon at the moment that there can be one dominator who can now win everything. Exactly. I always do my best and try to be fit at the start line, and then I just see what comes out in the end and don't want to put too much pressure on myself from the outside.
That's a healthy attitude, and we've also seen it in you this season. First, the sensational victory in Kraichgau, also against Patrick Lange. Then you only finished 6th at the Ironman Luxembourg, and then your sensational victory in Lahti, but then at the same time in a small race in quotation marks at the Challenge Vieux-Bocaux. There you came 3rd, but the field was incredibly strong. And nowadays you can only really perform in triathlon, let's say, if you really peak. And I think you can only take part in a few races and then win them on the side.
Yes, full. I think I'm just sitting far too high up for that. The France Vieux-Bocaux race was really well staffed. I think that was the highest strength of field score in a silver race like that. Exactly in the high density. The top 10, I would almost say, was actually already a world championship level, because there were also really very, very many who were in the mix. And then it was just not quite broadly positioned that there are 20 people who were able to win. But actually, I would have said that 10 of them, that they could all be at the front. Exactly. And there you could see a bit that firstly, the long season had taken its toll on me a bit. And then also the media hype, or not so much training after the World Championships. So I noticed that I was running out of energy and that things weren't going as smoothly as they had during the World Championships. The World Championship race went actually really relatively easy, I'd say. It was only the last 3 kilometers that really hurt. And yes, I ran Vieux-Bourgeois more slowly, but it still hurt a bit.
Yes, but that's usually the case. If you're having a good day, a faster pace hurts less. And if you have a bad day, a slow pace feels like the biggest pain you could possibly have. And you had special circumstances at the challenge Vieux-Bourgeois, you could say.
Yes, there was that cool travel problem again, where you somehow never remain immune. Yes, I flew from Leipzig via Frankfurt to Vieux-Bourgeois and then had actually planned a long layover between Leipzig and Frankfurt. I sat around at the airport for 5 hours to make sure my bike came with me. And yes, half an hour before my departure, they say the flight has been cancelled. I thought, how can this happen now? That they simply cancelled the flight half an hour beforehand. And yes, there was probably a bomb threat in Bordeaux. And that's why the whole airport in Bordeaux had to be evacuated. And yes, that's why nothing could land. Then my journey continued via Paris. And from Paris, I only arrived in Bordeaux 6 hours later than planned. Yes, my luggage didn't make it. And I was actually hoping that I would arrive on Wednesday and the race was on Saturday. And I thought to myself, well, 2 days. I still had to come. And yes, but my bike didn't make it. I ended up with a spare bike. So not a spare bike of mine, but just a borrowed bike. Also from KU. It was a bike fitter from France who came by and was able to lend me the bike. But with a KU bike, you can at least adjust everything quite well, but the frame is predetermined as to how tall it is. So the man is 1 meter 84 and I'm 1 meter 91. I also noticed that the size didn't quite fit, so I was a bit too tight. I then had hip flexor pain and back pain relatively early on. Exactly. So those weren't the best circumstances. But yes, even then I thought to myself, once I'm there, I want to try to start now and not say before the race, no, I'll stay in the hotel room and go home again without racing, because I would have been completely dissatisfied. That's why I just tried to organize everything somehow. There was a team from KU. There were quite a lot of people involved with the manager, who then tried a lot. And also the organizers were friendly and provided additional running shoes, etc. So the encouragement afterwards was really good.
So given the circumstances, I would also say that this third place was worth a hell of a lot. And did you really notice at the Challenge Vieux-Bourgeois that people treat you a bit differently now?
It was actually okay. I find, of course, I thought a bit beforehand that I was looked at or a picture was taken with me. So we have perceived I am better known and that I once became world champion. That was the case, but they say that if they take a picture with you or something, then they don't say, yes, okay, but now you have to win again this time. Otherwise, I won't take a picture with you next time or something like that. So they say, well, they don't put any pressure on me. And that's why I thought it was okay. And the athletes, I was actually quite well taken into account by them beforehand. So there wasn't a lot of pressure. And because there wasn't a lot of media hype about this race, not all the magazines were there and stuff like that. So I didn't feel that much pressure. No.
The media hype came after the race, but you had little to do with that. Let's put it that way.
Yes, that was more Mika's doing, yes.
That's true, though, and we've already heard a lot from you that things have changed a bit. What has changed in your life since your victory in Lahti? A few key words: sponsors, simply the whole area of professionalism, because you can certainly position yourself much more professionally now than was the case before your victory in Lahti.
Yes, it has definitely become easier to get involved in discussions with sponsors and to negotiate, precisely because, yes, after the World Championships, a few people approached me, which is how the contact first came about. And then there are a lot of discussions, the first meeting, and then just to see if it could fit. And then, yes, a draft of what we expect, so to speak. That's why it all still takes a long time. Then you have to wait for answers from the sponsor. And that's why it's become easier to talk to sponsors and get contacts. In general, you have to say that now is not the best time to talk to sponsors because somehow the economy in the sport is a bit paralyzed right now due to the 2 wars. Then somehow, yes, so many bikes were bought due to Corona. Now they are all in storage. So many bike dealers, yes, are canceling their athletes right now. That's why it's actually a difficult time right now. Many people say that now is not the best time. And of course, I don't know any different because I'm just coming in now, so to speak. There wasn't much there before, just say. But so just the local supporters, Christian Kubus, a friend here from Leipzig, who have already given money every month, but not that I've become rich from it. So that's just now. I'm still not rich now, but it's just a bit easier with contract talks. Exactly. And now we're actually in the process of signing a contract or finalizing a contract. So yes, by the end of the year, we actually want to have completed most of the deals even then.
Yeah, cool. And I'm happy for you that you can now position yourself better and earn more money with the sport of triathlon. We all know it's not exactly easy as a professional. Did you already have the manager you mentioned before, Lahti?
Yes, so not signing directly as a manager now. That was, yes, we did that in Lahti, but I've known them for 2 years. It's just through the bike brand KU, because he's also the boss there, so to speak. Yes, they already accepted me 2 years ago at the beginning of 2022 into a next gen program where they want to support young athletes. Exactly. And I was already accepted back then. And they invested a lot in me and believed in me back then. So you're the next talent. And your values are good, and exactly built a lot on me at first. So I always had a good relationship with them. And then now through Lahti, I've taken him on as a permanent manager. Exactly. And then next year, there will be a KU racing team, which is for professionals, so to speak, which will be built up around me as a team. And that's why it's a very good process. Yes, with him, I knew what to expect. He had a team before, Team PP. That was also a team before from 2006 to 2014 or something like that. Actually, the best triathlon team. He had also been a manager before. So he's also been in the industry before. So I had a good trust and a good relationship with him. And that's why it was a good fit.
I think it's really, really cool that you now have a reliable partner with whom you can build something together. And I think that's how great careers start. And we've now had a turning point this year with the retirement of Sebi Kienle and John Frodeno. And you embody the young generation. You're 19 years younger than John Frodeno, and I think it's all going your way now. Would you say that you have also changed personally as a result of the victory in Lahti?
I hope not so much, yes. So I'm still trying to stay down to earth, not to stand out, and yes, to be so friendly. So I don't really want to change much now. It was just a victory, but if I've got to the point where I can say, then I can carry on like this and I don't have to think that I'm better now or anything like that. And that's exactly why nothing has really changed. You can say that my self-confidence has grown a bit because you can say, yes, you've won a title before, but it wasn't before that I was the worst doubter and thought I couldn't do anything. That's why it was there before, of course, but now it's there again. You have it in the whole world, so to speak. You were once at the top. So it's a bit like that you can be a bit more proud of yourself. Yes.
Self-confidence is good, arrogance is not, but that's not how I see you at all. Have you seen other athletes become a bit more arrogant after achieving great success?
Yes, just not often. So in triathlon, I think it always works. It's actually quite a nice, friendly sport where everyone gets on quite well with everyone else. In soccer, it's just that they generally see themselves as a bit better and hover a bit above everyone. And I don't want that. But now Gustav Iden. He was also very, very successful last year, and he was really nice. And we met on the promenade in Nice, and he was really nice and greeted me as the world champion. And he thought it was so cool how I rocked it there, the race and all that. So he's just so likable too, even though he's already had so much success. So in triathlon, I think the community is more one that doesn't really stand out. Yes.
I would agree with that. And did you enjoy commentating together with Gustav Iden in Nice?
Yes, that was another cool honor to be there in the live stream. Lots of viewers. Yes, that was also something you like to take with you. Yes.
In 16 to 20 years, I would say you will simply take over from Sebi Kindle.
Yes, he is now also a presenter. Yes, he was in the tent next to us.
Yes, and he does the job really, really well. I'm always really impressed. I would consider him one of the greatest talents in the sports commentator and expert scene. And then there was also a documentary about you. I've now seen it on YouTube.
Yes, exactly. We are. So in Nice, we had a camera team with us. Then in France, we had another camera team with us. Or rather, it's actually just one person who does the camera, so to speak, and then also edits, which is actually also very cool that he can do it so well at such a high level. And then there's a photographer also as an extra team. So everything comes from KU, so to speak. 4 or 5 people are there as a team. Then you can also hand over a few tasks and do something like that. And that makes your life easier. And when something like that comes out, it's always really cool. And I'm always very grateful to KU.
I had goosebumps when I watched it. I confess, I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but what I have seen has completely won me over.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about this change in your life, and of course, there was a lot of hype. When were you able to return to normality a bit more, and what helped you to return to normality?
Yes, the last 2 weeks before the 2 challenge races were like that again. It became calmer, and it helped me to get back to the normal daily training rhythm, to have my fixed training times again, let's put it this way, and to say to myself, yes, now I have this on the plan, now I'm doing this and that, because then the session, which was prescribed by the trainer, so to speak, that the training plan has given me a bit of structure again and that I'm back on track. Yes, after the 2 races, I've taken the off season, and then now the start of this season is again, now that everything has calmed down. Of course, there are still the occasional conversations, a podcast with you here, but that if it's only 1 or 2 a week, then you can plan it in fully. So as an athlete, you're not training for 24/7 days a week. You have rest days or a bit of a break, so you can plan something like that. But of course, in the beginning, there were just 12 calls a week, and that was just too much. And now you can do everything quite well. And with the training plan, you can focus again.
I can completely imagine that. And how did you spend your off season?
Yes, I spent a few days with my friends, girlfriend in Saxon, Switzerland. I wanted to say Harz, but no, it was in Saxon, Switzerland. A bit of hiking there. I always like to be in nature, just to switch off a bit, yes. And then, yes, I was also studying at the time. So I focused a bit more on that again. So it wasn't a really long vacation and doing nothing at all, but yes, a 4-day vacation and otherwise doing a bit of studying at home. Exactly. But I'm not. So I was traveling so much before the year. I didn't want to fly away again or anything like that. So this short hiking vacation, I'd say, I thought it was nice, but I didn't want to fly away again.
I was very impressed by your hiking reel and enjoyed looking at it. And you've just mentioned your studies. That was actually one of our listeners' questions, namely, what are you studying and how intensively are you pursuing this course? Because as we can all imagine, it's difficult to reconcile professional sport and studying. And I think I also spoke to Nico Mann at the beginning of the year. He didn't really pursue his studies anymore because it was just too much for him.
Yes, I'm doing international management, actually business, a bit international. So we're not just learning German, but it's a course in Ansbach at Ansbach University of Applied Sciences that's specially designed for athletes. So it's only for competitive athletes, only competitive athletes. I think 30 per semester or per year can be accepted. So you have to show immediately that you're an athlete. Exactly. That's why it's an extra degree course for athletes. There are also a lot of triathletes on it. I think Fred Funk is also registered there, but has already put it on ice, if I remember correctly. Sebi Keenly was also registered once. I think he also did a physics degree once.
That's right,
yes. There are really a lot of competitive athletes on it, or only. And then also Lucas Dowser. He came second in gymnastics at the Olympics. And that's why it's cool to be together with athletes. And it's divided up like this. It's part-time. So we have the bachelor's degree over 10 semesters. That's the standard period of study for us, so to speak, which you normally get through in 5 or 6 semesters if you do it full-time. And that's why it's always the case that we have blocks, that you have 2 or 3 days a lot. Sometimes it's online, then you can do it from home. Sometimes it's on site in Ansbach, so you just have to go there. And then it's really 8 hours at a time, where it's a bit exhausting and you have to reduce the training, but then it's also 2 weeks, nothing. So I think we have more seminar papers and lectures than normal subjects. So you always have to prepare for that, but you can organize yourself quite well. So I think it works quite well with sport. And I also think it's important to do something in addition to sport, because sport can be over very quickly if there's an injury, a bad accident or something like that. I think it's a bit risky not to have done anything alongside sport or to start from scratch. And that's why I think it's cool that there's the opportunity to do it on the side.
What semester are you in currently?
I am now in the 5th. Yes, the 5th.
And how long do you have to study in total?
So 10 is the standard period of study, but I would be halfway there, but I did quite well at the beginning, so you can choose how many courses you take. And I took quite a lot of courses at the beginning. So yes, I would say I'm at 65% of my degree. So I'm a bit ahead of schedule, I think.
Yes, that's great. And it really sounds like you're going to see it through. And I have to say, I completely see it as the right way to go because, as you rightly said, it's so unpredictable. An illness, a fall, an overuse injury, and then your sporting career is over.
Yes, fully. That's why, yes, I do that too. My parents always said, yes, at least do something on the side. Sport is just really risky. And exactly, that's why, of course, I also know this now. So this semester, I'm also doing that. Then 3 courses or 2 courses. So I do notice that when it's stressful, you don't take so many courses, but you can organize it as you like. So it's really cool. And I don't think I have to rush through it now. So if things are going well in sport, I don't say to myself, well, okay, now I have to think about 6 courses on the side. That's also stupid. But I actually want to do 1 or 2 courses per semester.
And at some point, the degree course will be over, and then you can really focus completely on sport. And I'm already assuming that you still have a great career ahead of you. You've already mentioned your environment several times in passing, your girlfriend, Emily, your parents, but certainly also your sister. You also have a website called Die Bogens. To what extent have those around you supported you over the last few weeks and months?
Yes, my environment is very, very important to me. A family person, I would say. And that's why we all live in Leipzig, in my hometown. And that's why my parents are always close by. They also do sports, well, as a hobby now. But I think it's quite cool. Well, running is usually hard, but sometimes a long run somehow together, or something when it gets quieter. Then I also like to do it with my parents when it gets warmer again. Cycling with my dad is a lot of fun. He actually has good pressure and you can ride together. And exactly, my sister has always been there. We both started with the short distance where we actually always went together to the competitions and did everything together. And it was just cool that you don't have to travel alone, but have someone else with you, which takes a bit of a burden off you, which is always much more pleasant. And right now, she's just had her child, 3 months. So 2 days after the World Cup, the child came, right, where she's now in the process of rebuilding again. But she also wants to stay in the sport, also because, of course, my success there has inspired her, and she thinks that's good. That's why she'll continue to stay in the sport. That's why we'll continue to stay connected. Exactly. And the parents were important to make the sport possible in the first place, because without the parents, it's not financially possible in the first few years. So there really have to be parents who support it.
Yes, I can only agree with that. And I have the impression that you are a bit like the German family business, because we have a well-known family in France, the Laidlows, where it's really father, mother, Sam Laidlow, then the little brother in the case, plus the girlfriend. It's such a unit, and I think that's also the basis of Sam Laidlow's success. Do you see any parallels between you?
Yes, well, I also watched the documentary about him. Yes, that he simply has the support of his parents and the whole family, which is always nice when you have that. Of course, you can probably do it without parents. Many people also say that you're the first in the sport. The parents don't actually have anything to do with sport, but I think there still has to be support from the parents so that they don't say all the time, yes, why are you doing the sport? You'd better stop and we won't pay you anything and so on. So if something like that is there, I don't think you can get to the top. And that's why, yes, the parallel to Sam is just that we do all the sport. His parents probably don't do it as much, but there's definitely support. But what's not the same is that I'm not trained by my parents or by my, yes, well, he's trained by his father. That's not the parallel with me. So it's a bit more blatant with him, I would say.
Yes, I would say that too. Of course, unlike him, you now have an older sister. To what extent did Bianca also motivate you to do competitive sports or even triathlon?
Yes, when I was younger, especially because she's 2 years older, I was always the one who wanted to imitate her, and just she could already ride a bike, so I wanted to be able to ride a bike too, which is why I did everything. I'd say I learned everything a bit earlier because I just saw it in her, and girls are usually a bit more developed at a young age. The boys usually come later, which is why she was actually, I think, up to 12, 13, she was almost better than me, and then I got better at some point. Yes, but definitely in the early years where I would say I always looked up and wanted to do what she wanted to do or wanted to learn. As for the triathlon, I didn't necessarily copy that from her. We did that at the same time, so to speak. We both switched to the triathlon from swimming, yes, but we also did that together. But it wasn't as if she was now extremely successful in the triathlon. And I then said, oh, I want to do that too. So we did that together, so to speak, yes.
I understand, and it's just like so often that the older one somehow has a big influence on the younger one, and the younger one then somehow usually becomes even more successful due to the age advantage, I would call it now. It was the same with me and my brother. He's also 2 years younger than me, and he was often allowed to start doing things earlier. That wasn't the case with you in terms of triathlon, but I always had the feeling that he had a certain head start because he had already learned from me.
Yes, there could be something to it, yes.
And now I would also be very interested to know what your childhood and youth were like in general. When did you start training for competitive sports in your eyes?
Well, I started swimming relatively early. I think I got my seahorse at the age of 3 or so. So I started really early. And in addition to elementary school, we also swam in swimming clubs. SV Leutsch here in the next town has already begun, so to speak. I don't know exactly how often we swam, but we also did a bit of athletics on the side because my mom was still an athletics coach back then. We were in her group, so to speak, and did a bit of athletics there. And then, yes, after elementary school, the question was, now we both went to sports high school. Yes, what you do now, whether you do swimming or just athletics, triathlon wasn't really up for debate. But then we both decided to do swimming. And right then it was just, so from the 5th grade, you're 12 years old, I think, or 10, I think 10, right? Yes, 10 first. So from then on, I'd say it was really competitive sport because as a swimmer, you're really pushed at a young age. Yes, because it's often swimming twice a day and then athletics again. Yes, that's when you're really pushed. I learned early on, which also means a bit of discipline because it was often 7 o'clock at the edge of the pool and then school in between. And then another swimming session afterwards when you don't get home until 19 o'clock and then maybe have to do homework and study again. Yes, that's a very exhausting time. And so from the 5th grade, I would say it was then really competitive sport. And in the 10th grade, I switched to triathlon.
And for me, swimming is the hardest or somehow one of the dullest sports you can do. At some point, I just got fed up with it and was just happy to have ended up doing triathlon because it's so much more varied. And as a coach, I also experienced what it means to do competitive sport at an early age, at 12 or 13, to train 7 to 9 times in the water and then another 5 to 6 times on land. Did you have any lulls in between when you thought to yourself, why am I doing this at all?
Yes, in my youth, it was also difficult times when there was just so much training and then extra school. And in my youth, I was never so high up and extremely successful. I was usually a bit physically underdeveloped that I was only, yes, at 20, 21, I was fully grown. So now I'm quite tall. But in my youth, I was one of the smallest. I wasn't quite physically ready yet. That's why I often lagged behind in swimming, because swimming has a lot to do with size and the early developers who were already a meter 90, a meter 85 tall, and already had more muscles. They were, of course, much faster. And that's why it wasn't always easy times and there were difficult moments. But yes, then I switched from swimming to triathlon, I think, because triathlon is more varied. Swimming twice a day is sometimes very boring, and I don't like the competitions that much either. If you spend 5 days in the swimming hall and then only swim 5 times or something, I think it's much better to do a triathlon competition out in nature and actually be done for a day, but still get to cool places, which is why I made the switch to the triathlon. And I think that's the right thing to do. But even there in triathlon, the early years weren't super glorious. I had to work my way up, but there it was just that I enjoyed triathlon, that I enjoyed training. That's very important. Even if it doesn't go well, then you're very disappointed for 2 days. Yes, even if, because then there's always a DTU Cup here in triathlon. So for the youth such cups, then the first one was always actually enforced. And I actually trained well over the winter and thought that I'd made another good step forward, and then it wasn't good again. Then it was also difficult. Then you thought, oh, this isn't the right thing, or what's going on here? Why isn't it going well? But then you're usually a bit sad for 2 or 3 days, and then you still enjoy the training again. And that's what has always brought me back, that I enjoy it and have improved over the years.
But it sounds to me like you've had slumps when your performance wasn't quite right. That means that you were very performance oriented. Did you ever go through a phase where you thought to yourself, man, I'd rather go out with my friends in the city, have a few drinks and go partying? Because when you do competitive sport, you usually have to do it without things like that.
No, not often. And I've never really had a slump. So slumps were really only when it didn't work out performance-wise. And going out with friends, yes, it doesn't happen often, usually only once or twice a year. But I think I've done it once in a while, yes, but I don't have to do it every week. So I've never been one to cry about why I can't have it. It was never really important to me. It was more about meeting up with friends and having a coffee, which I still like to do. Or in summer, I like to play beach volleyball with friends and things like that. So that's the balance. I think I need that a bit too, and I always try to incorporate it when I can. But I've never let it get me down and never thought that I had to stop with the sport because of it.
I understand, and I too would prefer the World Championship title in Lahti to the party life, no question. And as you said, there are other ways to meet friends and build friendships. When did you decide that you wanted to do the triathlon professionally? Because we were even on the start line together as age groupers at Challenge Samarin in 2022. I mean, we didn't see much of each other because I think I was 35 minutes behind you, but I can still say that I was once in the same race as the later 70.3 world champion.
Yes, that was the beginning of the middle distance, as I was actually more of a short distance athlete. I just wanted to try out the middle distance for the first year to see if it suited me. That's why I thought, yes, you don't have to get a professional license right away to maybe just get hit in the face. So I first wanted to see how it works in the age group. And yes, since I was actually always in front and usually with a gap, and I'd have been relatively far ahead in the pro field as well, which is why I decided that yes, I'm good at the middle distance, so I might give it a go in the pro category as well. And that's why I decided to do it as a pro this year, because it just made a lot more sense.
It made more than sense, and you didn't just show that in Lahti, but already in Kraichgau, where you beat none other than Patrick Lange, who later finished second at the World Championships in Nice. And then last year, I had the impression swimming and cycling are already at a very, very good level. The running was really a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes it was quite good, but sometimes you completely blew up. I also saw a race result of 1 hour 34. I think it was somewhere in Spain. And now this year, on the one hand, you've become more consistent. There were ups and downs in your running performance, but how do you explain this increase in your running performance, but also this greater consistency that you have gained?
So as I said, I came from swimming, and that's why it was 5 years of only training for swimming and no time for running. Swimming was usually free on Sundays, but you don't actually use it to go running, which is why I find running the hardest, or found it the hardest after a long time as a swimmer, because it had to be built up from the ground up. And running is a sport where you have to be careful, where you can't just pull up the volume, because you have a high risk for injuries. So it had to be built up slowly and got a bit better over the years. Then I also stagnated a bit, where I thought I wouldn't be able to continue running. And then somehow this year, the knot burst again, which was another big leap in performance. On the one hand, I've already changed coaches to Joe Spindler because of the middle distance, which gave me a few new stimuli in running as well, which probably gave me another little tweak, but also the fact that I got through it injury-free and got through last year or the last few years quite well. It built up, so to speak, and then now the new stimulus. In the end, I think that's what I think has given me another big leap, and I hope that I can now do it more consistently over the years, that the running performance is simply at a high level. So it was very, very good in Lahti, and I just hope that I can keep it up now, or that it will become more consistent with further training.
I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. And what adjustments did Joe Spindler make to your running training? Have you also changed your running technique?
No, not that much. He's also an online coach, so he's not here in my hometown. So I'm not going to say that he sees me every day. Yes, I didn't do that much. I worked a bit more on my stride frequency because I'm usually a runner with big strides. Yes, and maybe in general, we've got a bit more quality, even with the intensive stuff that we did them earlier in the season. So we didn't just do basic runs for the first 3 months, but also sprinkled in more intensity. Exactly. So we worked a bit more qualitatively and didn't go overboard with training volume. I think that can also be expanded over the next few years, so to speak, which will perhaps bring even more consistency in the basics.
Less is sometimes more. And Joe Spindler, I have to admit, I know a bit about him now, but not very much yet. What makes working with him so special?
Yes, it's very pleasant to work with him because he has a lot of background. He used to be Brett Sutton's co-coach and therefore has a bit of a background from Brett. But he has now also built up his own philosophy and his own training style. And with him, it's just nice that on the one hand, he's already scientifically based, so not just old school, but we just do tests where we can see what still needs to be worked on. We also did that at the beginning, and that's why we knew what still needed to be worked on. And then we based the units on that, but then I can also contribute a bit. So I'm the kind of person who wants to understand the goals and benefits of the unit, so not just stubbornly training, but also why and who also likes to contribute something like that. So you say, how about this? How do we want to do this? Or there are some really good runners here in Leipzig that I like to train with. And then it's often the case that we don't have exactly the same training plan. And that's why I often ask Joe, yes, can we adapt it a bit? Or do they have to do the same as me in any case? And Joe is very open to that. And then we can often have a good chat about it. And that's why the cooperation, the trust is very good and something can be adapted. So the relationship is very, very good.
In my opinion, the coach-athlete relationship is the most important thing. It's exactly the same in my job, as I'm a full-time teacher. If the relationship with the students isn't right, then I can't really teach them anything. You sound like a mature athlete to me, and I think mature athletes are very, very positive, because I think that's also part of being human, that you question things, that you ask questions to understand why I'm doing it this way and that way. But you mentioned that he has a background with Brett Sutton, and Brett Sutton is known for very high volumes. I also spoke to Svenja Thors. If I remember correctly, he once had her run 54 kilometers in one day. Do you sense this background that Joe has in some sessions?
So since I've never been to Brett Sutton myself, not really, and I'm not allowed to bang on about the volumes. Patrick Lang also asked, do I always train for over 30 hours and a lot of runs and everything? Because he thought that Joe only does everything Brett Sutton does. That's just not the case, and that's why I would say he has his own style. That not everything is just a lot helps a lot, but also a bit, yes, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this with brains, but Brett would of course also think a lot about it, but right now not always just bang on it.
I mean, Brett Sutton is a successful coach. He has proven that over the years with Daniela Rife, and in that respect, there must be something to his training concept that makes athletes successful. And I think it suits one person, it doesn't suit another. And what I have always noticed is that he has also been more successful with women.
Yes, they also say that women are more resilient than boys, that they can somehow cope with even more and that you can let them train even more. But of course, I'm not going to badmouth Brett Sutton. So those who get on with him are often very successful. And exactly, I don't know him personally now, but if you build up a good relationship with him, I think you can become very, very good. And if he then responds to you and doesn't just let you hit it again, even if there is an injury, then it will be very successful. And of course, with Daniela Rief, Nicolas Spirig, and so on, he has also shown that he is very good.
Absolutely. And I think I just have to invite him to the podcast so we can talk about it in person.
Yes, that would be a cool idea, yes.
I'm sure many listeners will also be interested. Now, of course, the 2024 season is just around the corner. You're in preparation. What goals have you set yourself for the year with your coach?
Yes, we want to get even more into the PTO next year. I was never allowed to start there because of the ranking, because I was still too high. Now I'm 27th in the ranking. So yes, I'm still not really sure if I am in because I think they only want to sign 16 people. That's why I always need the wild card, but I hope or I think that I'll get it now. And that's exactly why it's the next, yes, focus on the PTO races to deliver another cool race because it's always a great starting field. And then just the middle distance 70.3 World Championship is then only in December. But yes, defending the title would of course be very cool, but that's the main goal again, yes.
Yes, cool. And of course, it would be a sensational story if you could win again next year in Taupo. And if I have the course profile right in front of me now, I have to say that it could actually be a course for Rico Bogen.
Yes, it's a bit hilly on the bike and rather flat on the run, isn't it?
Yes, it's a bit hilly, especially on the bike. And I think it would suits you in terms of your athlete profile.
Yes, I think so too. I'm also curious. I've never been to New Zealand. Next travel location. Yes, that's why I'm looking forward to it right away. I haven't given it much thought yet because it's still a year away, what it will look like exactly there. But I'm looking forward to it when we're fit again at the starting line.
Absolutely. Of course, it will also be challenging because I would recommend that you arrive in New Zealand in good time because the winter of November, December, it's sometimes like this, sometimes like that in Germany. But if it's like this year, then it will be rather cold, frosty and snowy, which of course isn't particularly good for specific preparation.
Yes, KU has already booked 2 houses again, 2.5 weeks earlier, so I'll be there sooner, yes?
Yes, and you'll certainly be doing another training camp beforehand, I suppose.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that's really the case. You now have these conditions and you have to use them to be successful. Have you already considered a long distance race?
The question often came up now that I'm a middle distance world champion. when will the long distance come? Yes, I don't want to do it next year because I'm still so young and I don't have to go overboard and switch to the long distance straight away. I had briefly thought, because I actually got the Hawaii slot by winning Lahti, that I would take it as a trip to Hawaii. But you have to validate it, so you have to finish one race and 2 long distances. I don't know if that will destroy the other plans so much, so we've now decided that we won't do a long distance next year and the following years. We'll have to see how it goes next year. Yes, I think so. If PTO continues to go so well, then there will be so much media attention. And that's why it's not bad to do this distance, middle distance and the PTO races. So you can focus on it for a few more years. But it's clear that at some point I'm going to do the long distance. Well, not just the long distance. I think you can do both, but I will do long distance races. And yes, then hopefully I'll be at the top of the long distance world championships.
Yes, I'm excited to see how the sport develops. Of course, we now have new opportunities thanks to the Ironman series, although it doesn't really fit into your athlete profile at the moment because you would ultimately have to complete 3 long distances per season. The PTO, if you're in it, you can certainly earn very, very good money. And what is, of course, also an advantage of the middle distances, you can regenerate a middle distance much faster than a long distance. Nevertheless, it's still the case that winning the Ironman Hawaii brings the most money.
You probably mean through the sponsors, right?
Through the reputation of Ironman Hawaii. So in total then.
Yes, because the prize money is probably the same amount or even more at PTO races victory, because you get 100,000.
I actually don't know that now. That's not my specialty, but I think it's not that relevant right now.
Yes, but yes, in any case, the attention on Hawaii on the long distance is probably even greater. You could see it again with the women's race. I even thought that Hawaii was viewed even more blatantly than Nice, if you look what was also broadcast on German television, because the second place of Anne Haug and Laura Phillips' third place were also shown on the news and everything. At the World Championships, where there were actually 3 Germans on the podium, it wasn't shown on the news or in the really, really big media. And Patrick Lang's second place at the Nice World Championships, I'm not sure if that was shown on the news, but you've already noticed that somehow Hawaii is already a bit of a myth. And I think everyone knows when you say triathlon that there's Hawaii. So it's kind of in there. And that's probably why it has so much more attention and yes, even more recognition. I don't know.
Yes, and I think it's still the right way for you to focus on the middle distances and the PTO distances for now, because you still have plenty of time. At the same time, I find it interesting that people like Clément Mignon, who is now a year older than you, or Sam Laidlow, who is now 2 years older than you. However, 2 years ago, he was already racing the long distance. The Germans are a bit more conservative when you look at Fred Funk or Jan Stratmann, who has now completed his first long-distance race at the age of 28.
Yes, the trend is now slowly moving back towards getting younger and younger. Is Clément Mignon really a 99 vintage? Is he that young?
Yes, looks older, I think so too.
Okay. Yes, I wouldn't have thought it about him, but I knew that Sam Laidlow was also very young. But yes, there is somehow a tendency for younger people to go for the long distance. I don't know why the Germans are a bit more cautious now, but yes, I also think with Mika and me, if we're going to do more long distance races and things like that soon, then we're still relatively young. Mika has also hinted that he might do one next year. So you don't have to say that the Germans don't go until they're 28 or 30.
Yes, I'm relatively sure that Mika will be racing the long distance next year. I somehow heard that from the podcast with him a few weeks ago.
Yes, I also had the feeling I heard him too. He already hinted at it a bit, yes.
Well, it will be interesting to see whether he actually implements it. I'm really, really curious. Then, of course, doping is also a big issue. And especially when you win, as surprisingly as you did, I can imagine that the statement might somehow come up. Yes, why is he suddenly so good now? What do you think about doping in general? And that's another question from the audience. Is it possible to be the best in the world without doping?
Well, I think there's only one clear opinion on the subject, and that's no. In other words, I don't believe in doping and think it's very bad. And yes, well, I don't think anyone who sees it differently really belongs in sport. And I know that it's possible. So I know that I'm not doping and that I'm still at the top of the world. And especially here in Germany, I think the system of doping controls is very good, where I would also say that I would trust it and say that nobody is doping here in Germany. And that's why, yes, my attitude is that you shouldn't do it and that it's definitely possible to reach the top of the world without doping. And that I'd say 98 or 99% of the top athletes in the world won't dope. And because otherwise, yes, actually in most countries, it's already so good that the doping controls are also very good. And we would hear much more about revelations. And of course, one case has already come to light now with Colin Chatia that someone did dope, but these are isolated cases. And I just hope that it stays that way in any case, that there is no doping and that people don't now think, yes, they have to start doping again. But I don't think it's possible to simply get through the doping controls in the system now in Europe, I think. And something as blatant as cycling was back then, where almost everyone doped, I don't think that's possible in today's world.
I hope so. And I would also put my hand in the fire for every German athlete that I have now met here personally in the podcast. I believe in clean and fair sport. And it always really annoys me when such general suspicions are made. I think Christian Blumenfeld is the perfect example of this. A lot of people don't really trust him anymore because he makes the switch from short distance to long distance, from long distance back to short distance, and so on and so forth. And then he also wins a PTO race. And for me, an athlete is simply negative until proven otherwise. And I think that's the right attitude to this whole topic.
Yes, exactly. So I don't want to accuse anyone and say, yes, you do it, you don't do it. I'm not the kind of person who accuses people of that. And of course, comments like that are stupid. You don't want them. And because there's a lot of training behind it and a lot of ambition and hard work, that's why I can't say to Blumenfeld, no, just because you're good at all distances, it cannot be true. So I just don't want to say that. And yes, if he were to test positive, I would be very shocked. But yes, exactly. I see it the same way. If they don't test positive, then I assume everyone is fair. And yes, walking around in the world like that now, always thinking, yes, okay, you could dope, I think that also destroys you.
Absolutely. And then you can actually stop with the sport straight away. You simply have to have a certain basic trust in the athletes, both as a spectator and as an athlete. How often are you controlled?
More often now because of the World Championships. It's happened 4 times since then. And before that, it was only at competitions, sometimes sporadically, if you were good there. But now, thanks to my success at the World Championships, I've been put into a higher test pool. So from a general test pool, where you only indicate where you have training locations, but not an overnight location. You won't be tested so often at home, but by the next level, where you also have to state where you sleep, you've been checked at home more often. Yes, exactly. It also depends a little bit on the performance, but yes.
Does it sometimes get on your nerves that you somehow always have to say, yes, I'm there at that time, or do you say it's just part of it?
In my case, I now have to specify a place to stay overnight. I think it's still possible now because you also have such a template, then you just press it. For the quarter, I am there at the one overnight location, the main location, so to speak. And then you only have to change it if you sleep somewhere else. I still have to get used to the fact that I really have to change it because it's only been 2 months now. Yes, now with Sailfish Night, for example, it only occurred to me the day before that I was like, oh crap, I still have to change my overnight location. So it has to become more of a routine that I always have to change it, but it doesn't annoy me now. I once heard something about a pool where you have to specify exactly where you're going to be. I don't know if that's the highest pool. That might be a bit annoying if you have to indicate every hour of the day. That would be very tiring, but I think it's good and right and not annoying.
Absolutely. And I think a missed test is the last thing you want to have as an athlete. And I think that over time you will become more and more familiar with it and never forget it again. What would interest me now is that you obviously also know international athletes. Are there any athletes where you have a certain mistrust as to whether they are clean?
No, not really sure. You don't know with Sam Laidlow because he's put himself in the spotlight a bit. But actually, I don't want to accuse him of anything because I was standing there, I think, at the finish line, and he was so emotionally with his family. I always find that when there's so much emotion involved, it's somehow so hard won. That's why I would also say yes. I wouldn't want to accuse him of anything, but I'm not really involved in it right now, so I can't really say much about it.
I also think that the topic may have been blown out of proportion, and perhaps it was simply inexperience on the part of Sam Laidlow. It certainly wasn't the greatest, not the wisest reaction. I would have just kept my feet still, and yes, let's just wait and see. I now have the feeling that nothing will come of it. And it would really be a disaster if something were to happen, because that would put the triathlon in a very, very bad light.
Yes, I also hope that nothing comes of it, on the one hand for him and for the triathlon, yes.
All right, and now we come to individual questions from the audience. And there was one in particular that I was looking forward to. The question actually came up. Sex before the competition, useful or not? Your honest opinion on this?
That's a very private question. All I can say now is my girlfriend was there in Kraichgau and at the World Championships, and I won both times. She's a very good odds maker. I would say it's always nice to have your family or loved ones with you. On the one hand, she always takes on a lot of tasks with support and taking things off and everything. That's why it's always nice to have your loved one with you. But whether or not to have sex beforehand is something everyone can decide for themselves. Exactly.
I also think it's probably also crucial how much beforehand. So is it 12 hours, 24 hours, or 5 minutes before the start?
Yes, now in the transition zone or something in between, I probably wouldn't recommend it anymore.
But I think you answered this difficult question pretty cool, and you're also a cool guy in general. Christmas is just around the corner. How are you spending Christmas now?
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Will be quieter and more family time. Christmas Eve, I'll probably be with my girlfriend and her family. And on the Christmas holidays, then go to my family. There's always a lot of food when you're eating with grandma and the other grandma. It's just family time and eating out everywhere. Between the years, I'm going cross-country skiing again with my family. So hopefully there will be snow here on the Fichtelberg in Saxony. We're not going to Austria or anything like that, but we're going to do a bit of cross-country skiing there with my family. So a bit of alternative training and a quiet time with my family around Christmas and a bit of relaxation.
Sounds very relaxed. And what else I wanted to ask, you'll be spending Christmas with your girlfriend's parents. Is this the first time you're celebrating away from your own family? Because actually I'm a few years older than you now. And I think with my previous two girlfriends, I was usually with my family on Christmas Eve. And this premiere is still to come.
Last year, I already visited her family. So this would be the second time, but because I really like her family and they also have a little sibling, Santa Claus is coming and all that. That's why it's still really nice. As I'm also going to see my family over the following few days, it's not like I'm going to be suddenly, I'm not even at home.
Yes, and then it's perfect. Then you'll spend a few days with your girlfriend's parents and then a few days with your family, probably together with your girlfriend, and that's how it should be at Christmas. And with that in mind, I would like to thank you for your time and the relaxed and cool podcast. Do you have anything else for our listeners, or do you have any final questions for me?
Not really that far. Thank you very much for letting me be here. To the audience, always have fun, be kind to each other, and just enjoy the fact that you can do sport and don't take it all too seriously.
I think that's the perfect conclusion. Just relax and pursue your great passion for triathlon, and then you'll be able to achieve success. And if you enjoyed today's interview with Rico, please leave us a positive review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the like. We are also happy to receive coffee donations via PayPal to the email address aswamiweb.com. klartext.de. And if you have any suggestions or ideas for improvement, just let us know. And Rico, have a great Christmas and stay healthy and have a great successful season with the second World Championship title in Taupo.
Cool. Thank you, and have a great Christmas season, everyone.
Hey guys, how did you like today's episode? I really enjoyed it, and I got on very, very well with Rico right from the start, and I hope that he can build on his successes of this year, next year, and I would also be interested to know how you liked this translated version. I found it really fascinating how close our voices came to the original version. That really was a special feature of this format today. And now you can expect another little advertisement. You now have some homework to do, and that is to go to the OMNi-BiOTiC Graz Triathlon and OMNi-BiOTiC Apfelland Triathlon pages. Find out a bit more about the two great races and then register as soon as possible to secure a good price. And then you go to the OMNiPower website, and there you will find Carbotonic and the Gut Bar, for example, and these products are really designed to be absorbed as well as possible in the intestine so that they can support you in competition or training. If you want to find out more, I recommend listening to the podcast with Chris Nindel. And on that note, I hope you have a really good week. I hope you continue to enjoy listening. Your Alex. End of advertising.